I am your host, Marck, and welcome to the Mistake-Free Real Estate Podcast. Just had a brief mistake, I will admit, that we actually forgot to hit the record button. So, hey, no mistakes in real estate, but we have plenty on the podcast side. I'm joined today by a good friend, Curt Ramsey. Curt, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mark.
So for the audience out there, tell them a little about who you are and how we met.
Okay. Well, like I said, my name's Curt Ramsey. I started in the real estate world basically from just reading books, trying to figure out how to go through this process that's real estate investment and you know, originally was looking at trying to do flips and some of those things, and had found a partner, a friend of mine from college, that had a lot of the same interests, and he was in the market that we were trying to get into, which Kansas City market. And I don't live in Kansas City, but I kind of had the business and mindset and more of a monetary backing to do that. And so we kind of partnered up and thought, you know, this would be a great deal. We can work together. He can manage flips. He had a construction background, construction management background. And so thought, well, this will work, and started down that path by ourselves. And we would, you know, try to look for deals, you know, through realtors and everything that we thought we knew at the point. And, you know, we'd find a deal and try to figure out, okay, well, how are we going to fund it? How are we going to do all these things? And you know, we needed to find a lender that would work with us. And so I did a lot of just phone calling. I mean, I called all the banks, all the local banks in the Kansas City area that I could come across, and got on the phone with a guy, and he said, hey, have you ever talked to Marck? And I thought, you know, who's this guy? And I don't need to know Marck. I'm smart enough to do all this on my own. And he said, you know, he's doing the same thing that you're trying to do, and he's a pretty sharp guy, and you know, it might be worth a phone call. And so I said, okay, well, you know, I took the phone number down and thought, okay, well, I'll call this guy sometime and, you know, go on. Well, we kept trying to look for properties and just couldn't ever get anything bought, based on, you know, where what my credentials were and what I thought, you know, a good property would be, and none of that would hit. And so we finally got, and I thought, you know, I'm just call this guy and see what he's all about. And called him, talked a little bit. You know, we talked on the phone a couple times, and then I thought, you know, I need to at least see this guy face to face and kind of vet him. And so we did, and, you know, came over, we talked, still had the partner, and thought, you know, this would be something, you know, good. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. He's from New Zealand, so, I mean, those guys they're obviously cool. And kind of had a good relationship, you know, kind of sparked some things there. And I thought, okay, well, this might work. And so we started flipping. And we did the first, you know, deal with Marck, and had a partner, and the partner just couldn't make decisions, and you know, it was tough. And I had at the time, my stepdad made the comment. He said, you know, the only ship that doesn't float. And I thought, you know, I don't know what that is. And he said, well, it's a partnership. And he was absolutely correct in this certain scenario, because after we got down to it, things just didn't work. And so we did a flip, and then we were done, and kind of our mindsets were a little bit different. So we kind of broke ways, and said, you know, we'll continue to do what we're doing, and I'll do it my way, and you can do it your way, and go from there. And then, you know, Marck, we just kept kind of continuing to talk to each other, and I think we did some more flips. I don't remember how many we did there over the course of a couple of years. And then you kept on me about, you know, you need to start buying and holding, and and where I was at career wise, I didn't know, like, can I afford that? Things, you think worst case scenario. If all this bad stuff happens, do I have enough cash flow to take care of this? And do I have, all these things to do it? And it starts to weigh on you a little bit. So, well, let's flip a couple more and then we'll get to that point. Well, we did. And then you finally talked me into buying the first one. And that one has been, fantastic property. It's been, I still own it. It's always a good producing asset. The tenants, the original tenants are actually still in the property, and they continue to pay. And we've paid that property down substantially. And then we did some flips in that. We do some flips, and then we buy some more, and kind of got to the point. Then you kind of changed how you were operating, and got more towards the buy and hold. And so we tried to buy as many and hold as we could at the time. And now we're up to 5 properties that we hold, and things have been good, as far as that goes.
Let's do a deep dive on that, on those individual rentals, because that's quite a mind shift there, Curt, where you go from just an active investor to becoming a passive investor. You had mentioned that, let's step back to what you were first talking about there, where you said, you wanted to get into real estate. What was it triggered you to want to get into real estate in the first place? You said you read books. Is there one that jumps into mind, and who personified, the wealth? A lot of times it's not just a book, but also you have people also that are kind of in that, you come into that phase of life where you see someone that's done well in real estate. Did you have a mentor in that regard as well, or was it just from books?
A little bit of both. He wasn't necessarily a mentor. When I was in college, I worked for an insurance agent that had a friend that was in real estate. He was another insurance agent, and so I would sit down and talk to him, at times. And at the time, this was early 2000. He had, I don't know, he had acquired somewhere around $12 million worth of real estate. I don't remember how many doors were in there, because he had an LLC for every million, is what he had always done. So he had talked about the real estate and how it's helped him acquire wealth, and so that was kind of the trigger, that, hey, this guy is doing that, and it's something that you can do long term and create some passive income. So he was kind of the catalyst, probably, that got me going down that thought process. And then so and it's kind of cliche of what book did you read, because everybody has read the book, and that's probably been the biggest catalyst for most investors, is the Rich Dad Poor Dad book. You read that, and it really, kind of starts to trigger things of, thought process. And investing, from everything that I have taken from it, investing it's a mindset, and most people aren't to that point. There's a thought process of, okay, how am I going to acquire wealth, and how am I going to do the things that's going to help me? And if you don't have a mind shift change, you'll never get to that point. And so Rich Dad Poor Dad was the catalyst, and then you start throwing all the other books that's up there, Millionaire Next Door. There's all those types of books that kind of started getting me right after college. Started making me think about those different things, and okay, well, what do I want to do? And so once you get to that point, you're thinking that way, and then there's a point that you've got to get to. You just got to do it. You can talk about it, and you can think about it, and you can try all these things, but it's analysis paralysis, and I had that for a while until we started talking, and there was a point, probably November, December of 2012, that I finally just told him, I said, you know what, I've been talking about this stuff for 10 years and I haven't done anything. And where's it got me? And I've got to get to the point that I'm just going to go ahead and do it. And that was really probably the start of you and I's conversations about how do we set this up? How do we do this? And that's when the other partner was involved. And after that, figuring out how we can, move forward and do those things. So.
Yeah. So, then there's another shift, I think. So the first mind shift, I agree with you. You've got to say, okay, I'm all in on the investing side. But then there's another mind shift that has to take place to going from where you're an active investor trying to, go after a deal and secure it. And then you have the rigors of trying to, locate a realtor to try and find a really good deal. And then you got to try and get a contractor that's going to treat you fairly. And you're only doing a one-off transaction. And then
Right.
you got to try and, get a property management company. And so all of this stuff, there's a reason that a turnkey provider like ourselves has a business, but you've got to get that mind shift in your investor, so you as an investor has to kind of get that mind shift from being an active investor now to being a passive investor. So when did you finally get comfortable with taking your hands off the reins? Because I mean, you are one of our, perfect investors that you've always been like, hey, Mark, whatever you think, I'm fine with that. Where do you is it the comfort with the practitioner? Is it getting comfortable with who that person is? Or is it a different mindset shift that has to happen for you to become comfortable with a passive approach where you're more hands off?
I mean, I think the reason that I got to that point fairly quickly was just the relationship that we had. You've been very honest and upfront with me the entire time, and I feel like we had a lot of similarities of things that we enjoyed to do and talk about in mindset. And the first property I did with you, I'm like, man, I don't know this guy. I've met him, I've talked to him a couple times, and I'm like, man, I hope he's not screwing me. You hope that everything's going fine, and you try to vet people, and you do all those things. And after the first one, it's like, all right, man, this guy's sharp. He's got some systems in place, and he's taking care of all this. And then it's a level of all right, you're doing your job, and the part that I love about what you're doing now is it's just managed so professionally. You don't when you look at your reports and everything that comes through it, it's just handled in a way that leads to credibility. And I told a buddy of mine that you've talked to here lately. I've been trying to push him on to you. I told him the other day, I said, I can't get you to 3 of my properties. I don't know what they look like. And I don't care to know what they look like. I drove, him and I, we came over to see you there a few months ago, and it was probably the first part of the year. And I drove him by the one property that I know how to get to. And it's close by the office, so it made it a little bit easier. But the rest of them I don't know. And a lot of that, speaks volumes of the team and crew and crews that you've put together, and how they manage that. And typically, you're right on the mind shift change on that, because as type A personalities or entrepreneurial type people, we like to be in control, and that's a hard thing to give up sometimes. And I've got some other properties we've kind of talked about that we've kind of gone out and done on our own. And the bad part for those properties is you're the litmus test. And so when we're trying to go through those, it's like, well, Mark's not doing that. Mark doesn't do it this way, so we need to do it the way Mark does it. And that speaks volumes for the ability to have properties managed. And you've gone through some turnover in some other maybe the guys that were managing the rehabs or the property manager side of it, and there's hiccups in all of it. I mean, nobody's perfect, but the hiccups that I've seen, they get smoothed over really quick, and that just, it speaks volumes for the professionalism and accountability, that I don't worry about it. I mean, I worry about the other properties that I'm dealing with, but I don't worry about the properties that you're dealing with. And,
I appreciate that sentiment. we actually, so you spoke to two words there that really resonate with us because that's two of our core values is professionalism and accountability. The other two obviously
Yep.
being good communication or communication and quality. And so, with regard to professionalism and accountability, you mentioned some turnover that, once you become very clear, at least I've found it, I know as a business owner yourself, you can relate. Once you become clear in who you are and what you stand for, it makes it pretty easy to see those that are not going to toe the line. So, what I've found is not only do you have to be, quick to fire and slow to hire, but also you've got to make sure that you're hiring talent. And that's the one thing that we've really done well in the last 2 years, I would say, is just every time we've tried to level up with talent and, get people. One of my favorites quotes is that it's easier to do than to think. And so instead of getting a bunch of doers where it's very easy to just go do something, if you actually sit down and think about it before you do it, that's a whole nother level. And that's what we've really tried to do. I think what you're referencing in the level of professionalism here at the office is evident from the staff that we are surrounding ourselves with quality thinkers. Is that fair?
Yep, I'd say that's 100% accurate.
So let's go back, mate, to so obviously now you're on the road, you're getting some cash flow. I know there's hiccups along the way. Looked like, I was reviewing some of your numbers in 2019. Was not great. Obviously there's some hiccups there. 2020, it couldn't be any better. We're more than halfway through the year, almost 3/4 of the way through the year, and super strong. Talk a little bit about your cash flow and how the properties are performing and how they did obviously in the dip in 19. What happened there?
19 was kind of a rough year as far as cash flows go. You still get the appreciation of the property, which is fantastic, and you've got someone living in the property that's paying for all your expense. But we had a couple things happen that you're just going to have happen. We had a sewer line in one property that collapsed, so that you've got to pay for it. So that hurts cash flow. And then we had another property that was having some water issues that we had to do some work around the foundation of the house to get the water to drain properly. So, we weren't having any issues there. And those things hurt. I mean, they hurt your bottom line. I mean, but you own real estate and that's going to happen. I mean, if you think that it's all roses and full of sugar and spice and everything nice, it's just not. I mean, real estate's messy. It's just like anything else. But you get through those years.
But to be fair, so going deeper on that, when you say we had to do certain things, yeah, it's messy, but you didn't have to get involved whatsoever, correct? Just to be clear.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything. I just have to respond to the email that says, I know, we got to do it. Let's do it. And then it gets done. And that again, it goes back to the professionalism and those things that we talked about is, I'm made aware of a situation. I'm reasonable enough and understand enough to know that those problems have to be solved. Otherwise, you're going to continue to have it. And then you're going to have somebody that doesn't live in your property anymore. And the property may continue to go, downhill. And now you don't have anything. It's not an asset anymore. It's something that's just going to bring you down.
Well, and you talked about the longevity of tenancy too, because, I mean, you've had one tenant that's actually been in there now so is that going on 5 or 6 years or something?
Yeah. Yeah. It would be the very first property that we bought with you was Staten Avenue.
Yeah.
And that couple still lives there.
That's awesome.
So, and that speaks to the volume, that speaks to the value of the remodel. It speaks to the value of the property management. It speaks to all those things because we're obviously taking care of them. Otherwise, they'd go find somewhere else to live. And there's plenty of properties out there that they can go live in. And, we just don't have much turnover. You'll have some turnover here and there from, some other properties. One of the properties I have, actually the only one I know how to get to, it's a little bit more of an expensive property. The rent is better on it. So we've seen more turnover there because sometimes it's, the very first person that was in there was somebody that sold a house and needed a year to, build another house. So of course they've moved on. And then we've had some other people kind of come and go in it. But it's always rented. We never have an issue. I think maybe we've had maybe a month to where it wasn't leased up. And all the other properties, I mean, that's usually within a couple weeks, we've got stuff that's already leased up, and the pre-leasing and some of those things. So they've always done an exceptionally good job on it. And then this year, even with COVID, we were concerned what we were actually going to happen. How's that going to affect the bottom line? And I looked at it the other day, and I thought, wow, this is pretty good. But you kind of brought it to light even more. Is we've all properties, our expenses are down, rents, they're still paying rent. We've worked out a few things with some of them to make sure that they could stay in the property, and we've maybe paid first of the month, middle of the month, or some of those things to kind of help offset some of that expense with them. But they still pay, and they're still staying in the property. So there's a lot of good that's coming out of that. And those people probably aren't going to move that easy, because you guys have done a good job of working with them and telling me what you think is best. And usually whatever you guys say is best is pretty accurate. I usually don't disagree, and they're going to stay. I mean, when you show that level of care and concern for somebody, they're going to take care of your property, and they're going to stay.
Yeah. So what Curt's referencing is a couple things there. One is that we waived, through COVID, we waived late fees just to make sure that, to be clear, we want to make sure that everyone had the ability to pay. We also offered up and said, hey, look, if you're having trouble, first we're very clear that rent is due. This is not something where we're gifting rent, and everyone understands that. But at the same time, we came back and said, for those that do need help, let us know. And we were very flexible with payment plans and arrangements. Most of the time, it wasn't that extensive. There were a couple of times that there was some rent gifted for some unusual circumstances. But I know in Curt's case, there was one that asked to pay on the 1st and the 15th rather than just the 1st of the month. And of course, there was no penalty for that. So yeah, you've just got to show care. You've got to show concern. You've got to let them know that there is a person on the other end of the line that's willing to listen and go with it. But I think what you're talking about is all these, just having dialed in management, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have a really dialed in property management system, you can reduce the two big killers of cash flow, which are simply vacancy and maintenance. And,
Yep.
Our pre-leasing that you referenced is really becoming a hot commodity because we're in a super aggressive time frame as far as the scarcity of housing in Kansas City. Our pre-leasing has really cottoned on to be a very strong component of the leasing department's strategy, and they are now literally renting the properties out before they even become vacant, and then doing really quick turns. So, which before for single family is highly unusual to have someone move out and move in within 7 days, but they're actually knocking that out of the park right now. So, yeah, really encouraging. So you mentioned something earlier that I want to go back to, where you said that wondering whether you could afford the property or really build wealth, and that it would kind of, the worst case scenario would weigh on you. How do you feel about fear? Like, is it something that you battle? Are you a cautious person in general?
I probably was more so when we started this, because I come from two blue collar parents that don't really understand the value. I mean, they understand the value of money, but they don't understand how to make it. They don't understand, they've kind of worked their jobs, and my dad worked for 30 years at a power plant, and at the end of 30 years, you get a retirement, and that's just what you do. And so that's kind of what I knew. I didn't know any, when I was growing up, I didn't know any, other people that did what I really wanted to do. And so, when you listen to other people, everybody else says, "Oh, real estate's bad. You're gonna have terrible tenants. They're gonna tear up the property. You're gonna lose your money. It's just a terrible deal." And most of those people say that because they either bought one property and they tried to manage it themselves and had a terrible experience, or they were dealing with contractors on trying to rehab something and they didn't have a relationship with those people or didn't have the volume to do it. And so you had problems. So they're always going to speak to the problem that they know and tell you how terrible an idea it is. And so, that was, kind of another mind shift thing that you kind of got to get over that. And as time has gone by, and as I've gotten older, and as my mindset has shifted, fear was a pretty big deal in the beginning. Otherwise, we'd have done a whole lot more, because when we first started talking, you weren't doing the volume that you're doing now. And I was telling a buddy of mine the other day, I said, man, I kick myself in the butt for not just saying, Mark, let's roll. Let's just do as many as we can do. I'll figure it out and, go from there. And some of that is, just understanding that it's going to be all right. That, yeah, you're going to have things happen, but if you're buying multiple properties that are good properties, they're all going to cash flow, and you're going to have some cash. Now, every once in a while, you're going to have to throw a little bit of money into it, but I haven't put that much of my own money in these properties.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I was going to challenge you on that, because, I mean, you've had these things since 2013, 14, 15. I mean, you've had them a long time, and these things have been spitting out some cash. If you've been, I mean, I would imagine that if you looked at your, net positive cash flow over that time period, even with some capital expenditure, like in 2019. In fact, did you have to put money in 19, or was it just straight out of the account that had been building up that cash flow anyway?
It was a little bit. We did have to put a little bit in 19, but most of it had been, because we really, and again, it goes back to the point that I kick myself in the butt for not doing it sooner, but we had one for a long time. And then it's like, okay, now we got two. And and you kept on me, and you said, hey, you need to do more than one. You need to do two, and you need to do more. I'm pretty sure that was our conversation on every time we talked. And finally, I was like, all right, Mark, fine, I'll listen to you. So I started buying more. And, once you hit 3, 4, 5, now that's when you really start to see that account increase. And, probably 3 years ago is when, 3 years ago, we were, I think, at 4. 2 years ago, well, two and a half years ago, I think we finally got to number 5. And then last year hit. And so we had some money there, and we did, maybe a couple $1,000 is all I had to put in there. And so you look at what my net wealth is now, because of buying good assets and having quality property management on it, for the amount of money that I've actually put into it, there's not much of any.
Yeah, well, I mean, the capital growth you've had since, 13, 14, I mean, that's just been a run up lately. I mean, I think you'd be shocked if you were to turn around and get some quotes on the valuations on those nows, which, as a side note, probably is worth your time. Are you putting individual notes just on each individual asset? Because now that you've got 5, you may want to just do one big bulk refi, put it onto one note. You could probably get a 10-year fixed at 4% on all 5 properties, and then lock that interest rate in. So, as a side note, while we're talking here, Curt, that's probably not a bad play.
Right. Well, and that's, I've kind of run some numbers on some of them, and there's pretty good value in there that, the tenants have paid down. And so, we had talked about that a little bit, start of the year, end of 19, start of the year. And then we kind of thought I was smart enough to go do some stuff on my own, and trying to figure out how do we manage both of those things. But yeah, there's a lot of value in that, because I think now is the opportunity with interest rates where they're at, being able to get them all together. There may be some opportunity to leverage some of that into additional properties, or just get them all set up to get paid off quicker.
Yeah, so one of two things. Why, and hadn't even gone that route. But if you wanted to do a cash out refi, now would be the time. But the other thing would be, just even if you don't pull cash out, just to do a refinance on the existing debt and put it on a 10-year term, so that you can more aggressively pay that stuff down, even if it's amortized over 20 but fixed for 10. Your payment probably wouldn't go up all that much, because I know some of your interest rates are probably in the 5s, are they? Yeah,
I've got one that's actually refinancing right now, and it was 5.5, and I was looking at the other one, and it was 5.5. So yeah, getting anything locked down to get it down to 4% would be a huge ability, and then just getting paid off that much sooner. So then you just got that much better cash flow on those properties.
Yeah, and I know you've got some irons and other works for those. Curt, I am certainly just one bucket of Curt's arsenal, one kind of tranche of resources. So although he has 5, he's got many, many other assets. He's done new home construction. and he's doing
Yep.
some currently under some doing some kind of rehab lift type value add stuff in city of St. Louis too. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yep.
really growing in confidence. So super proud of the steps you've made, and honored to be a part of your single family portfolio. But it's great that you're taking that knowledge and going and really doing some other things as well. So kudos. You say you've only got 5, and some people are like, oh, he's not one of your larger investors. I'm like, well, I mean, if you look at his total portfolio, he's done quite well. So
Yeah, absolutely.
hey,
Well, and that
go ahead.
it just speaks a lot of volumes to having someone that's good at what they do around you to give you the confidence to do those other things. And that's a tip of the cap to you. Is I wouldn't be doing the other stuff that I'm doing had we not had a lot of those conversations beforehand, and just to see how your operation goes. Obviously, you're a big feather in the cap of what I do. And how it's helped increase my wealth. But there's obviously there's plenty more that you and I will do together. But it helps with the knowledge and the background to see how a professionally ran business is. To help you do some of those other things. Because when you go out on your own, it's scary, and without having those partners around, it makes it tough. And so trying to go back on some of those things and conversations and all that. So it's kind of a tip of cap to you to kind of help me do a lot of the things that I can do too. So.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that very much. You mentioned that, obviously you would have done more sooner. One of my notes is always to ask people, if you were talking to your younger self, let's say when you were 25 years old, what would you do to accelerate the financial learning curve? Sounds like your answer would be, just take the plunge and do a little bit more sooner.
Yeah. I mean, that would have been the biggest thing. When we started doing the flips in 13, I think we bought the first one in January, February of 13. We did a couple that year, and I should have just started buying as we were doing those and building some cash. I should have been buying, rentals then. And it would have been interesting to see how many that we would have now, because it would have just snowballed. Instead of talking about 5, we're probably talking about 10 or 15 at least. And, you're looking at what your net worth comes, because of that. And, you're not paying anything for it. And understanding the mind, and again, it's a mind shift change. And that is so hard for some people to understand, that if you don't change the way you think, it's never going to work. And you've got to be able to do that. And sometimes you got to make yourself uncomfortable, and you got to push yourself a little bit every day to get to the point of where you feel like, this is stretching me. This might stretch, but every time I've done that, it works. As long as you're doing it, in a calculated way, and you're putting some thought to it, you're typically okay. I'm not to say that something can't blow up in either one of our faces, but if you put some thought to it, and you really think about how you're going to handle things, it typically works out.
I love that. There's a Jim Rohn quote that he said, "We must all wage an intense, lifelong battle against the constant downward pull of others. If we relax, the bugs and weeds of negativity will move into the garden and will take away everything of value." I think that kind of speaks to what you're talking about there, that if, what you and I are dealing with is such, an upper level thought process, and something that is higher and above most people's pay grade, intellectual pay grade, if you will. Do you do you try and surround yourself with positive thinkers, and is that part of the attraction to the conversations we have, is just kind of being able to talk at a level that you necessarily wouldn't do with just your dinner mates that you're hanging out with?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, but everybody else doesn't know. I'm in a small town. There's 1,800 people, maybe 1,700 people now that actually live here. And so there's just not many of those type of people here. And so trying to find others that think the way that you think, that will push you, is tough. And that was probably the biggest draw that I had to you originally, was you're a forward thinker, and you're thinking about those things, and you pushed me to think, and be uncomfortable. And doing those types of things help me grow. And then it helps me find other people like that. And, some of the other businesses that I've got going on, those are the people that I search out for. And if I don't have them, then I don't do it. If I can't build those relationships with somebody, it's just not going to work. And, what the quote of, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you need to find another room. And that's 100% correct. Because if you're at the top of it, you're not getting pushed, and you're just not going to grow as a person, as a entrepreneur, whatever it is. And when you're in a smaller community like I'm in, I've got really great friends and they're great people, but they just don't think that way, and that's a limitation on them. That's all it's ever going to be for them. They're okay with that, and that's fine. And we need those people in the world, but you've got to have a different thought if you want to make it to the next level, and if you want to have things that other people don't have, you've got to change how you think about stuff.
Powerful, man. No, I appreciate it. It reminds me of that old analogy that if you're trying to avoid getting influenced by who you hang out with, it's kind of like trying to avoid getting wet when you swim, right?
Yep, it is. It is.
Well, Curt, this has been a pleasure, man. It's a kind of interesting when we weave these podcasts together. This certainly turned into a bit of a mindset episode, and really appreciate it because I'm so positively geared that way that I know you and I share a likeness in, taking a positive mindset approach. And it's been a joy to work with you over the years. And I want to thank you for coming on today and spending some time with us. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. Anytime. And always enjoy talking to you, and I always learn something in our conversation. So it's always good.
Thanks so much, buddy. Appreciate you.
Yep. Take care.
Okay.
You're listening to Mistake-Free Real Estate Radio, the authority in passive real estate investing. No late night calls, no clogged drains, no tenant nightmares. Take the passive investor's approach to real estate investing and trust a turnkey professional. Learn more at mistakefreerealestate.com. Until next time, remember, you don't get rich from what you earn, you get rich from what you own.